If I were to ask you right now, who or what is the most terrifying supervillain you've ever seen in a TV show or perhaps a movie, or maybe read in a novel or comic book, or encountered while playing a video game, who would it be? Thanos, the Joker, General Zod, Alien, the Predator, Terminator, the Thing? What if I told you one of the most terrifying supervillains was just a regular lady? No super strength, big hands with infinity stone, shape-shifting ability or special suit. Just a regular middle-aged lady. Beverly Keane, played by Samantha Sloyan in Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass on Netflix. Beverly Keane is a resident of a fictional place known as Crockett Island, once a vibrant fishing community, but then devastated by an oil spill. This results in the slow death of the island, with most of the inhabitants leaving. Everything seems bleak and people are desperate. Bev Keane is the self-appointed administrator and moral arbiter of the community. Her sanctimonious, self-righteous attitude, coupled with her belief in being special and chosen by God, emboldens her to invade other people's spaces and dish out what she considers justice at any given time. She is extremely judgmental, and her justification for unsavory actions is tied to her belief that she's better than other people. Therefore, her moral compass is whatever suits her goal, no matter how violent or obviously illegal they may be. It's alright, because God loves her. Therefore, her atrocities are part of God's plan. These evil acts take place throughout the 7 episodes of the Netflix limited series. In episode 1, while walking down the street, she comes face to face with a big, energetic dog which belongs to the town's drunk, Joe Collie. She calls it a menace and accuses it of trying to attack her.
Snapped right at me. But I'm telling you, Sheriff, it's a menace. Sorry.
Now, to most people, even non-dog people, would just move on. Maybe ask Joe Collie to keep the dog on a tight leash, but not Beverly Keane. In episode 2, Erin Green walks in on her, holding fatal poison, so she carefully crafts a story about a cat infestation on the island that needs to be dealt with. While the cat infestation was true, as we will learn at the beginning of the 2nd episode, that was never her plan. At the local potluck attended by the locals of the island, she poisoned Joe Collie's dog. Joe Collie holds the dog, cries and begs for help as everyone watches on in this heartbreaking scene. Everyone, including Bev Keane, the one responsible. Straight away, we get a sense of the kind of person Bev Keane is. The killing of the dog is senseless and cruel. So, we can start her list of crimes with poisoning and animal cruelty. No reservations when it comes to killing the innocent. That dog never did anything to her. She simply didn't like it and thought it was a menace. By the end of episode 2, Father Paul appears to perform a miracle when he convinces Lisa, a paraplegic who was accidentally shot by the town's drunk, to get up and walk. By episode 3, the whole island is buzzing with the news of Lisa's miracle. As expected, as the self-appointed moral arbiter, Bev decides to hand out Bibles to all the students. This is of course a no-no in a government-funded public school. When Sheriff Hassan, a Muslim, takes issue with his son being handed a Bible, Bev attacks his religion and belittles him. She then manipulates the other parents to turn against him and give her a round of applause, forcing him to back down. Now, this might not seem like a huge deal at the moment, but it demonstrates her alarming ability to manipulate a crowd, which will matter later. Something happens in episode 3 that a lot of viewers only noticed after a second watch, or when others pointed it out to them. Bev Keane realizes Father Paul is in fact Monsignor Pruitt. After gazing upon an old photo of him, we later see Bev Keane still carrying around the poison. Soon after, Father Paul, or Monsignor Pruitt, begins to get very sick. He later collapses and dies. He exhibits the same symptoms as Joe Collie's dog. Even though everyone pretty much realizes Bev's not a good person, Joe Collie, the town drunk, is the one person who truly understands how dangerous she is. He pretty much told the sheriff she killed his dog in the previous episode.
I've known that woman since grade school.
And now, He begins talking about Bev Keane embezzling money meant for the island inhabitants and indeed the church.
I mean, why not just name it Bev Keane's money laundering? That's all it really was.
Her realization of Paul being Pruitt most likely meant she wanted to conceal her financial crimes, because before he was old and suffering from dementia, which meant it was easy to just control him and everything. Everything, including church finances. Pruitt wakes up from death and becomes a full vampire with a hunger for blood and begins to burn under the sun. By episode 4, the angel's blood had worked its way through the island inhabitants and caused Erin Green to miscarry. Bev Keane begins sucking up to Pruitt after murdering him. Joe Colley decides to fix his life and go see Pruitt. Pruitt, overcome by his overwhelming hunger for blood, kills him and feasts on him. He fails to attend Mass because he's both covered by Joe's blood and unable to step under the sun. While everyone waits for him, Bev Keane goes to find out what's wrong. In one of the most chilling scenes of the show, Bev Keane opens the door, looks at Joe Colley's corpse, looks at Pruitt covered in his blood, and then proceeds to lock the door behind her in an effort to help conceal the obvious crime that has taken place here. Not just any crime, murder. Most people would panic at such a sight from fear of being murdered or fear of the legal implication, but not Bev Keane. She calmly talks him out of feeling any guilt. She then enlists Wade and Sturge to help cover up the crime. And when Wade reacts like any normal, well-adjusted human being would by screaming, "What have you done?"
What the hell did you do?
She slaps him across the face and begins quoting Bible verses to justify literal murder. She uses the word "it" to describe Joe Colley, a human being. Bev is the least affected by this death. Even Father Paul is horrified and questions his actions. The man who committed murder is more horrified than Bev Keane. Bev goes out of her way to insinuate that Joe actually deserved to die for accidentally shooting Lisa in order to stiffen her father's resolve and help cover up this crime. Her ability to immediately find a Bible verse to justify any and everything goes on throughout the show. In episode 5, Riley walks in on the vampire giving more blood that Father Pruitt's been using to quietly poison the church. He gets killed by the vampire and comes back to life. Pruitt spends this episode trying to convince him to keep this secret and join them. But Bev has this look, a look of disgust because she believes Riley doesn't deserve this gift by the angel. She looks down on Riley because he's an atheist and he committed manslaughter during his DUI. But by episode 6, Riley refuses to go along with the vampire thing because he doesn't want to hurt anyone. Bev manipulates Pruitt to come clean to the church and turn everyone, citing who knows who he talked to, referring to Riley after he committed suicide. Monsignor Pruitt goes along with it and they set a sinister plan into motion. They intend to kill everyone with poison after demonstrating with Sturge. He reveals this terrifying vampire they consider an angel. People are terrified of this grotesque creature. Inevitably, of course, some refuse to, drink poison and commit suicide. Sheriff Hassan tries to leave with his son and pulls a gun. In the struggle, Monsignor Pruitt gets shot in the head and is incapacitated for a while. Many drink the poison and those who wake up begin biting others. In this chaos, Bev Keane, who encouraged people to drink poison and turn to vampires, runs away and hides in another room. Now, we get to see another side of Beverly Keane, a hypocrite and coward. She barely believes what she preaches. She was discovered by Erin Green and a few who escaped the church. Erin shoots her and flees, but she inevitably wakes up. She tells Sturge to ignore the incapacitated Pruitt's orders to keep everyone contained to avoid chaos. She once again begins quoting Bible verses to justify releasing infected to kill other inhabitants of the island she considers sinners because they aren't members of the church. Therefore, they are sinners and heathens. In the most terrifying scenes imaginable, we see the infected church members rampaging through the streets, killing and eating people. Now, we can add mass murderers to Bev Keane's list of crimes. Monsignor Pruitt recovers from his gunshot wound, looks around at the catastrophe he has brought on his people. He confesses to Mildred Gunning, his ex-lover, that he did it because he wanted to save her life from old age and the Alzheimer's she was suffering. He wanted to give them a second chance to be young again and grow up with their daughter. Bev Keane goes to Erin's house to settle the score after she was shot. They hurl Molotov cocktails at the house to force out the fleeing uninfected. Annie Flynn decides to sacrifice herself so the others can live. She stabs herself in the throat, attracting Bev Keane and Sturge to feed on her. Sturge attempts to put out the fire to save the island, but yet again, Bev begins quoting Bible verses to justify her desire to burn down all of Crockett Island. Some rubbish about using her embezzlement rec center as Noah's Ark to save the worthy. Now we can add arson to her list of crimes. Her terrifying intentions involves going to the mainland to kill those deemed unworthy and infect everyone they can. Now Pruitt has grown a conscience, looking on the island as it burns. He confronts her saying, "We did this wrong. We are the wolves. It's not supposed to be about us, it's supposed to be about God." She assumes control of the church, which is what she always wanted to, and decides to pick out those who deserve to live. Her brutality knows no bound when she is completely unfazed by a crying man who confessed to killing his wife and sons. She decides he should be left to die in the sun because he wasn't a member of the church. Sheriff and other uninfected decide to burn the church to stop the infected from leaving the island and save the rest of humanity. She shoots him and calls him a terrorist and says he has dirty blood, being a Muslim and all. Monsignor Pruitt and Mildred Gunning burn the church, and Sheriff's son completes his father's plan to burn the rec center. There's nowhere else to go before the sun comes up. As the entire island burns, the church members accept their fates and turn to God for comfort while singing. That includes Sheriff Hassan and his son, who pray fervently before he collapses and dies from the gunshot wound that Bev inflicted on him. Instead of turning to God, the self-righteous, holier-than-thou Beverly Keane does everything she can to escape the hell of her own making. We see her literally digging a hole in the ground to take shelter from the rising sun. None of that works, of course, and she burns in the sun, screaming like a lunatic. A coward who barely believes the things she spews. The most terrifying aspect of Bev Keane is just how quickly she could produce a Bible verse that seemed to completely justify her view, even if her new view makes a 180 from a minute ago. So, why did I decide she's the most terrifying villain I've seen in my many years of watching all kinds of movies and TV shows? Remember when I said at the beginning of the video, just a regular middle-aged woman? Yeah. Well, that's why. Thanos, General Zod, Homelander, Alien, The Thing, Predator, none of them exist. But you know what? Beverly Keanes of the world exist. Master manipulators in form of world leaders, cultists, other types of politicians, and people in positions of power. That terrifying ability to find the Bible or other religious scripts to fit their motive. Think about it. If you can turn a bunch of churchgoers into mass murderers and arsonists, what can't you do? Remember, this is a show that features a winged, blood-sucking vampire that's immune to gunfire. Still, that creature wasn't able to do 1/10 the damage Beverly Keane did. There has rarely been such a perfect representation of evil on the big screen.